good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you're signing in from today. Really appreciate everybody joining us, and I'm more than pleased to introduce Brian Penny, Wallbridge's CEO, and Mark Peterson, Wallbridge's Senior Geological Consultant, for a digital town hall today. Gentlemen, how you doing?
Excellent, and thank you for inviting us, Romeo.
Awesome. So the format for today is we're going to go through a number of questions from me, and then we'll be taking questions from the live audience. So folks, this is an interactive event today. There's a chat button in the bottom right hand of your screen. Once we get through my questions, more than happy to hear from you guys. So please enter your questions at any time during the event, and we'll try to get to them at the end. If for whatever reason we don't get to your question today, I'm going to be sending them through to the Wallbridge team to make sure that they get back to you over email, but we'll try to tackle as many of them as we can during the event today. The other thing to note is this event is being recorded, and the replay will be available because we're getting it done pretty early in the day today, probably by this afternoon. So you'll automatically get that sent to your inbox. Please feel free to share it because at that point the event is entirely public. So let's get right into questions. I've got a list of questions for both of you. My first one is actually to Mark. My question really, with almost 30 years experience in the industry, what drew you specifically to Wallbridge?
Well, a few things. I'd say kind of starting from the outside, working in, mainly it was doesn't come along every day where, you know, an explorationist, no matter how many years of experience you've been in the game, to have an opportunity to join, you know, a new and emerging gold discovery and development story in one of the world's premier gold provinces, the Superior Province of Canada and the Abitibi Gold Province, which is kind of central core to that. And so, you know, right there, great address, lots of gold, but also Wallbridge's, you know, land position strategically is really quite significant. You know, they've already got in a relatively short amount of time since acquiring the Fenelon project only several years ago, they've already got two deposits with you know, million ounce plus potential, and those are contained within a large contiguous land package that extends nearly 100 kilometers along trend, along the same belt of rocks that hosts the Detour Lake gold mine, which is, you know, Canada's largest producing gold mine today. In addition to that, the company has a strong balance sheet, is well funded, and has a really strong, smart, focused, and committed team of people with a lot of range. We've got both you know, experienced mining professionals as well as some of the younger generation coming into the game who were really keen and really full of enthusiasm and energy. And it's just a real pleasure to be able to work with a team like this. And finally, it's just great to work with Brian. Again, we've worked together in the past. Brian has a profound amount of global mining experience, and knows the capital markets inside and out, and he knows how to maintain a healthy balance sheet just through, you know, disciplined good financial management. So, you know, those are kind of the cornerstones from my perspective on what makes for a successful mining company, regardless of whether it's at the earlier, middle, or operational stages of its life.
Well, appreciate that. And you're about 90 days on the job now, right? Or somewhere close to that. Given that, what surprised you about Wallbridge's projects? I guess particularly Fenelon and Martiniere.
Yeah, I was aware of, you know, I follow all the stories, and I was aware of Fenelon peripherally, but not really in depth. But I think, you know, what really struck me once I got, you know, more up close and personal with both projects and the broader package was Fenelon. It's really a relatively new discovery, and in a very short time frame, you know, Wallbridge had a small starter kit of a resource that a predecessor company or companies had fleshed out, and then Wallbridge acquired the property and put together the land position. But as they were, building off the initial resource that they had, they very quickly and very smartly got onto some of the broader scale geologic controls. And suddenly they had a multi-million ounce gold system, kind of a tiger by the tail. And, everybody likes big gold systems, but what I really like about this one, as well as Martiniere, is it's a high grade gold system. And strikingly to me, it's one of the few. I worked on quite a few gold systems over my time. This one in particular there's just a lot of visible gold that shows up, and that's always a great a great thing to have in the mix. And also Fenelon, you get high grades beginning right at very shallow depths, right at the top of bedrock, and the system extends vertically down. It's been explored and delineated down at least 400 meters. It remains open at depth, as these Abitibi gold systems typically do. So there's definitely upside for the future. But also what's quite nice about Fenelon is, yes, it's multi-million ounce, which bodes well for its long-term future. But right up on the front end, it has a high-grade core that looks to be very amenable to developing, a nice sized, discrete, high-grade, high-margin underground mineable type of a resource. And that right there that's just a great starting point. But then you shift over to Martiniere, which is a completely separate gold system to the west of Fenelon, some 30 or so kilometers. And that's not as far along on the exploration resource delineation path as Fenelon, but it definitely has all of the earmarks to offer the same type of size potential, as well as high grade potential, and in some respects, some parts of it may even be even higher grade. It's a different type of an animal geologically, somewhat from Fenelon, but again, a nice million ounce potential and lots of room to grow it. We've been drilling on both, but this year and right now, the main focus is on seeing what we can do to grow the size of Martiniere even more beyond what it is. So, those two components right there are a really nice combination to walk into and be able to drive forward.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Next question, and great questions in the chat, by the way. I will certainly get to the ones that I've seen so far. One question, this is for both of you. I'm going to start with Brian. A lot of people called Canada 13 jurisdictions in a trench coats just because of how different working province to province can feel. With your major projects in Quebec, what would you consider the advantages or challenges of working in La Belle Province?
Well, thank you. And, Quebec is one of the most favorable jurisdictions on the planet to work in. The latest Fraser Institute study ranks Quebec as number 5. I believe Quebec should be number 1. The government financially supports exploration in the far north to the tune of a 38.5% cash refund when you file your tax returns for qualified exploration expenditures that are not financed from Quebec flow through. Quebec flow through, the subscribers would get that benefit. As you can see, recently we received a check for $8.1 million, and that is this refund for the 2023 tax year. That will go into our coffers, and that will be part of our program in 2025. In addition, we have great support from our local communities, whether it's the town of Matagami, with our First Nations partners, the Waskaganish, Washasibi, and the Abitibi-Winni First Nations. We have pre-development agreements with the 2 Cree communities. We're working on one with the Algonquin community, and great relationships. We have bi-weekly meetings with the communities. We're operating as if we have PDAs with the 3 groups. We share the economics equally, and we're working early to develop a long-term relationship. One of my challenges, and this is me personally, is I grew up in Sudbury. I have the equivalent of about grade 10 high school French knowledge. And with a lot of the traveling I'm doing, I'm about to subscribe to some services. So when I'm leaving Toronto and driving up to Fenelon, I've got 4 hours of uninterrupted French tutorial. So, my goal is to improve that. It's later on in life. I'm not a linguist, but I'm sure I can get a lot better than I am today.
That's great. I learned French reading Tintin, so that's always available. I'll throw to Mark your experiences working in Quebec and what you think of working in the jurisdiction.
Yeah, well, I've worked a number of places throughout the Americas, a bit of time in Australia. I've never really had much opportunity to work with a project in Quebec until now. But what strikes me, I guess, is something I've always known, but now I'm experiencing it firsthand, that it's a very friendly mining jurisdiction. It's got deep roots in Canada's mining history, and will continue to have grow those roots. And with that, it comes with the benefits of having good access to the resources you need for mining exploration and development and ongoing operations. And those are the tangible physical resources, but as well a very deep pool of very experienced professional talent and skilled trades in the mining sector. And it's just committed to continuing along that path as one of the premier jurisdictions in Canada and in the world for mining, not just gold mining, but that's what we're focused on, but certainly other things as well, as we're seeing in other parts of mining sector. In terms of challenges, I'm mainly a technically focused guy. I do think about the economics of things a lot, because that's really what drives everything. But from my perspective, and it's not unique to Canada, I think it's more just unique to working in the north. Obviously you've got, it's more remote, so you've got some logistical hurdles that you just need to deal with, and we deal with them well. But it, it's a factor. And more specific to geology, and one of the reasons the Fenelon project and the entire Detour Fenelon trend has remained less explored relative to other parts of the Abitibi is that we're exploring undercover. There's not a lot of bedrock exposed at the surface, so we have to use more advanced, more indirect methods to guide us in determining where we want to go and explore. And so we're leveraging that to maximum effect. But it certainly presents a challenge. But it's not unique to Northern Canada. This is just a trend in the industry overall, and we'll continue exploring undercover. Will continue to be a trend going forward. So we're managing to it. But finally, I think the thing that I was less familiar with, but really a really nice bonus is, and I really mean this, culturally, even though, when you go to Quebec, I don't speak French. Hopefully I will pick it up as I progress along here. But the people are just so genuinely open, friendly, and wanting to help. No matter, doesn't matter, what you're doing. It's just a really welcoming place to just spend your time and to work. So that I didn't expect, but it, I thought I should mention it because from a personal perspective, having worked in many places, it's one of the better places I've come across to put my time in.
It's hard to overrate a welcoming community for sure. I've got one for Brian, and this is a question that we got a couple places via email. The stock has seen some shorting recently. Curious what you think the source of this is and what it means for both holders of the security and prospective investors.
Well, how I can answer that question is, recently our stock has traded between 9.5 and 11 cents. We have good support around 9.5 cents and resistance at 11. Our short position is less than 0.25% of our issued and outstanding. So, on face, it's not a big problem. It's down to 1.8 million shares. And it continues to decline. We continue to follow the Save Canadian Mining Group with respect to their paper on naked short selling. We believe this is a regulatory matter, but if the industry can put pressure on the regulators to deal with this, that would be good news as well. We did support them with a donation in the fall of 2020. We're monitoring the situation, and we're learning like everybody else as this project moves on.
Awesome. Appreciate it. One question. So we already talked about it briefly when we were talking about Quebec, but last week, obviously received a tidy sum from Revenue Quebec for a tax refund, and obviously, congratulations. The speed at the delivery is great news. I'm curious where that money's going in 2024. And I guess I'll throw it to Mark, sort of as a way to give a geological work plan for the rest of the year.
Well, can I tell you where the money's going to go first?
Sure. Yeah, please.
Please talk about the plans for 2024.
Please do.
We closed the quarter with a strong cash balance. With this refund, which came very early this year. Usually we get it in the fall in September, October. This year we got it quickly, which thank you to the Quebec Revenue Service for sending us that money. With that, we're earmarking to close the year with roughly 14 to 15 million in the bank. That is earmarked for 2025. So this money is not going into the ground this year. It'll go into the ground next year. Mark has a program for 2024, which he'll discuss further. But assuming as we figure out our program for next year, assuming that we have a similar size program, the delta between $21 million and $14 million is financeable even in the most challenging markets. So we're not going to blow our brains out this year. We've got a steady hand approach, and that money will finance the startup and probably, half of the year, if not more than that, for next year.
Oh, great. Helpful context. Thank you. And I'll throw it to Mark for that kind of exploration updates and what's coming this year.
Yeah, so we're about halfway through the year, of course, and so far this year, we've drilled a little more than half of the planned drill meters for the year. We expect by the end of the third quarter, when the field season comes to a close, we expect to have completed on the order of 20 to 23,000 meters of drilling. What we've achieved so far in the first quarter was our initial program at Fenelon, which was really a continuation of a broader drilling campaign that began about the beginning in early 2023 to do some kind of combination infill and short step out drilling of the Fenelon resource. We completed about 2,300 meters in the first quarter, and that pretty much rounded out, I think, the objectives that were set out at the beginning of 2023. We released those results a few weeks ago. I was quite pleased with them. What they demonstrated and further confirmed was we have high-grade mineralization that's showing up in a cluster of I call them sheeted vein swarms without getting too technical, but they start right up near the surface. So we've confirmed the grade continuity, or added confirmation to the grade continuity of the near surface portions of the resource. And in addition to that, the deeper portions of some of the same drill holes provided additional confirmation of grade continuity in that higher grade core that I mentioned earlier. And then we also, this time around, it wasn't, 2,300 meters was not a big campaign, but we did take a stab at a couple of step out holes. One of them closed things off in an area way on the far northeastern edge of the resource, where we already knew continuity was a bit sketchier. That was in the original part of the resource that was there when Fenelon, or when Wallbridge arrived. But the other hole gave us a couple additional 100 meters of strike extent to the deeper Tabasco and Area 51 contact zones, which definitely will merit some follow up down the road. So after we finished with the Fenelon campaign, we transitioned over to Martiniere, and we actually doubled up. We had one drill to start with. We added a second drill at Martiniere, and we just recently completed our phase 1 program at Martiniere, which was on the order of 10,000 meters completed. That went very fast, and that drilling was primarily directed at doing a bit of infill and incremental step out resource drilling, but also to collect mineralized material that will be used to go toward metallurgical process test work that will feed into our ongoing technical studies that my colleague Francois Chabot is spearheading. So we've done a fair spread of metallurgical drilling through the Martiniere resource as it's currently defined, and in parallel with that, we did drilling to collect data for geotechnical and geomechanical rock mass characterization work that Francois needs to put together a PEA level kind of a mine plan for Martiniere. So that work is pretty much done. Coming up actually next week, May is almost gone, believe it or not. We will be heading back out with the drill to start work on some of our high priority regional targets that our team has identified. Right now, we will be starting in an area in between Martiniere and Fenelon, working on some areas that really haven't been much drill tested before at all, but we're seeing very, very good indications out of the geophysics and some of the regional geologic compilation work that's been done. So that's going to be happening coming up in June. And then come mid-July, we'll be going back to Martiniere for phase 2. Now, phase 2 will be more oriented toward more the earlier stage exploration step out to try to grow the resource beyond what we can see right now in front of us. And we've already done a little bit of that on the tail end of the phase 1 program that's given us some real encouragement, what we're seeing in the drill core. And then come later in August, once we wrap up phase 2 at Martiniere, we will have a phase 2 regional drilling campaign, and on that one we will be moving to targets to the west of Martiniere, where currently we can't do any work because there's a hiatus in drilling for a portion of our property while we let the caribou calving season run its course. They were there long before us, and we have to respect them. They're very important members of the community. But we will be going back out west of Martiniere on some high priority targets out there. And in terms of news flow, I would expect, I'm expecting to have all the final results of Martiniere Phase 1 drilling in hand and ready to release around mid-July, I think, is what we're looking for. And then come toward the back end of Q3 in September, I would expect we would have the results of Martiniere Phase 2, and then the results of our regional program, both around that same time frame, and then the last part of the regional program, probably in early Q4. Well, that's what it's looking like right now. We're tracking very well in terms of performance to budget, which is always a good thing. We haven't had any surprises there. And yeah, you know, our team is staying on top of all of the various moving parts that drive one of these programs.
Awesome. Appreciate that update. My next question, I had a version of it, but Glenn Westerhoff in the chat has a better version of it, so I'll simply ask his. He says, it looks like we're into a new bull cycle for gold. This is a question for Brian. How is Wallbridge positioned to capitalize on this upwards momentum, and what are the target goals we want to achieve to see investments grow in value?
Well, you know, it's something I've been in this business for almost 40 years now. My first senior role was CFO of Kinross in 93, so 30 years. I've seen cycles. I remember $250 gold like it was yesterday. What I can say is that what I'm seeing right now is the valuations are starting to return to the senior producers. And, you know, they'll be the first to benefit from the higher metal prices because, you know, it immediately impacts their earnings and cash flow. Then it'll trickle down to the middle producers and ultimately to the junior explorers, because we're the furthest away from monetizing that. There is a time lag. This has been repeated over the 3 decades I've been involved, and it is very similar. You know, will the money filter down into the juniors, you know, early next year, later this year? Well, you know, the market will determine that. You know, Mark's got a great plan. We have a great team. We have a great property position, 830 square kilometers. We're focused on advancing that project. Our biggest goal is in early 2026, sooner if we can get it done quicker. We will publish a combined PEA for Martiniere and Fenelon, because the two properties are 30 kilometers apart. There are definite synergies. You know, we're doing a lot of trade-off studies on Fenelon, looking at Martiniere as well. So, you know, that is our, you know, midterm news flow. And then in the, you know, the in between, we will be looking at one thing that Mark didn't mention was the MET results should come out in the fall of this year sometime. So, you know, you've got a good idea of our news flow until next year. And then obviously in the fall of the year, we'll put out our business plan for 2025 on, you know, where we're looking to advance the project. But I'm excited. I think this is a great opportunity. You know, things we need to look at. Do we go back and look at the CapEx and build a more scalable plant that, you know, makes financing easier? Yet to be determined. But we're looking at everything right now with the goal of improving the overall economics of the project when we put together this combined PEA in early 2026.
Great, thank you. Now, Mark, bear with me because I know you already answered this question to some degree when you outlined your plan, but not to put too fine a point on it. What is the next major milestone for Wallbridge on the exploration side, and when can investors expect additional drill results this summer? Just to reiterate.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, in terms of news flow and drill results, as I mentioned, the next batch should be coming out in mid-July to cover off on Martiniere Phase 1. And then in early to mid-September, I would expect the balance of results from Martiniere Phase 2 and a bit of our regional program results in terms of news flow there. In terms of the next, you know, significant milestone, I think it would be a combination of just what comes out of, you know, what comes out of our exploration news flow. But in tandem with that, as Brian mentioned, the results of the metallurgical test work that we've initiated along the technical studies front. So what really impresses me again about Wallbridge is it's not a one deposit type of an exploration story at all. It's really an early stage exploration junior play, but with an already built-in and moving pipeline, beginning with Fenelon being the more advanced, Martiniere not too far behind it, and then the regional upside piece that we're not turning our back on. In fact, we're giving it our full attention as well. So it's really those three legs on the stool that I think underpin the Wallbridge story and why it's kind of, in a way, it's unique in terms of what's out there, in terms of its stages of development, and the upside potential that it still offers on at multiple stages on the curve.
Great, thank you. Next question's for Brian, and again, thanks for questions in the chat. We're just about to get them. I'm almost through, I promise. But this question for Brian: what's your current cash balance, and when are you likely to need to undergo a financing next?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we closed the quarter with a strong cash balance. We got the $8 million. I don't like to talk about non-published cash balances because it is a bit selective. But I did guide you to we looking to close the year with $14 million in the bank, and if we propose a $21 million program against next year, there's a $7 million deficit that we will look to finance between now and mid next year.
Great, thank you. Last question, I think, for just Brian. Curious what Wallbridge's broad philosophy is when it comes to stakeholder engagement in the region, and do you anticipate any roadblocks as you move towards a PFS and FS?
We got in early. We meet with our partners regularly. Every 2 weeks, we have a meeting with our Cree partners, and at least once a month with our Algonquin partner. We are truly partners. 25% of our workforce comes from the First Nations communities. We have great support right now from them. As we get into an IBA and other things, we're investing to make that process streamlined going forward. Our biggest challenges were in the middle of nowhere, and the logistics of getting materials and supplies, and we have a camp environment, so organizing that. That's about it.
Perfect. Last quick question for both of you before I get into the audience questions. Appreciate everybody's patience. Really, what are you most excited about going into the second half of this year? I'll start with Mark.
Well, I'm really pleased with what we've achieved so far. Not only in the execution, but the results that have already started to come through. The exploration it really is a results driven process, and we're getting very strong positive results. We continue to get them, so I'm quite pleased with that, and I'm really looking forward. Now that we've kind of taken care of some of the more predictable, call it infill resource drilling at Fenelon and Martiniere. What I live for is really to grow resources and create more value. And as we turn our attention to the regional program and step out exploration at Martiniere, that's really kind of the tip of the fun spear, if you want to call it, give it a name. That's what all exploration geos, what really drives us, is creating value, creating opportunities that didn't exist for people in the past, and just making that next discovery.
I might use tip of the fun spear in the future. It's very evocative.
Just made that up. So
I'll quote you. I'll shift to Brian for what you're most excited about in the second half of the year.
Well, what I'm most excited about is the continuing drilling, looking for new discoveries, similar to what Mark said, the results of our regional programs, the completion of metallurgical results. Because initially Balmoral about 8 years ago did some metallurgical drilling. Unfortunately, as the resource has grown, some of that work was outside where the resource is today. So, that's why we're doing this. It's the right thing to do it up front rather than leave it later on. And I'm most excited about in 2026, the combined PEA, because the deposits are so close to each other. There are synergies that we haven't uncovered yet that we're going to work our guts out over the next 18 months to get it into a plan. And then from that, develop a permitting timeline, your project description, and, get into the next higher level studies after that.
Great. All right, well, let's jump right into audience questions. So there's quite a number. I'm going to tackle them mostly in order, unless they're combination, in which case I'll combine them. But if you ever feel I haven't addressed your question, please let me know in the chat and I'll get to it. So MLB, this is during one of your earlier comments about exploration, Mark. He said, it's great to hear the reinforcement of the resource and potential, but he's curious, what, if any, downsides have you seen to date with the geology at the projects?
I wouldn't say I've seen anything that really gives me pause. I think as we understand, what makes Fenelon tick as an ore body, we will continue to learn. But I think we are doing the right thing by focusing on that centralized high grade core where we know we've got a chunky part of the resource that really lends itself to development at a meaningful, at a reasonably achievable scale. So that's that's quite encouraging. I think the broader resource of Fenelon, that's just really good gravy for future upside. Probably the thing that gives me the most pause is it's really the challenge of exploring undercover up there. There's just a lot of cover that you can't see through. We're in the process of developing plans for how to deal with that with a different type of drilling program to drill through or to actually drill that overburden profile, because there is gold in it, and that if we can get a handle on what's happening in that profile, that'll give us one more tool to vector in on the better parts, because 100 kilometers of belt, that is a lot of ground where a lot of things can happen, and we already know where two pretty interesting things are happening along that belt, and we have a lot of smoke that's shown up in legacy regional drilling that's been done, as well as some of the more recent exploration drilling that Wallbridge did just last year. So that's probably the biggest challenge, is just exploring under the cover and doing that both effectively and as efficiently as possible.
Great. A question from Fred in the chat. He asked if it looks like the high grade hit at Ripley was a one-off.
At Ripley, I don't know the answer to that, because we really have not turned our attention back toward it since that was done last year. So I would have to say the jury would still be out on that. I don't know if we're going to turn our direct attention back to Ripley this year or not. But what I would say about Ripley ties it back into Fenelon in general. High grade intercepts are very common throughout the system, which just speaks for a strong, robust gold system. On the one hand, and on the other hand, you have to, the challenge is how do you model that and come up with good, robust estimates that support, good mine planning, good development plans. And, we're also working that front, as well as, on the ongoing exploration program. I didn't speak to that very much, but we are very, very focused on how we're going to, continue to build our models and learn as we go to come up with good robust estimates that we really understand and that the folks downstream in technical studies and beyond can really work with.
Great, thank you. This question from Don for Brian. He asks that given the recent challenges in attracting institutional investors, what steps are being considered to enhance your strategy and better address shareholder concerns?
Well, we're always looking at our strategy. We're always looking for how we can improve what we have today. So, we continue to advance our strategy discussions. We are very busy on the IR side of things. We are at the Quebec conference next week, which I think we've got almost 30 meetings now. Last fall in Zurich, we had 20-some meetings. A lot of smaller institutions are booking meetings, asking questions, and hopefully that will resolve in purchasing of the equity at some point in the future. It feels like the market is turning. We're spending a little bit more money to get out there and tell our story. We're going to do more sessions like this in the future because we recognize that, the shareholder base that's on this call right now is as important as large institutions. And we will, continue to work at that. We've got a plan for this year. And later on this year, we'll tell you our plans for next year as, how we're going to continue to advance the project and, create value for our stakeholders.
Great, thank you. Matt asks in the chat, with the closure of Glencore's operations in Mattagami, has the government approached Wallbridge in a way to help foster the growth of your properties or to help support the future of Mattagami?
Well, unfortunately, that was a base metal asset. And, it comes with many years of production there and a very large tailings area. And the process plant would have to be significantly modified. It's too small. And, because of the grade of the ore, to ship it to Mattagami, it would probably eat too much of the economics. So it's off the table.
Great, thank you. Next, I'm going to combine a couple of questions, and this also includes one we got on email. People are looking for anybody on your team to address the concerns presented by Crux investors, as they've noticed that it has seemingly impacted share price.
Well, as far as Crux is concerned, I've looked around, I've listened to it. We've completed a PEA. It is not a pre-feas, it is not a feasibility study. It's not perfect. It's the best information we had at the time. As we learn more, we will continue to advance it. And there will be more infill drilling. A lot of these questions that he has will be answered in the future. So I think he was a little hard on the team, but that being it, we understand his concerns. And as we go forward with our drilling, we're addressing them as part of our programs. Is there anything you want to add to that, Mark?
Yeah, all I can say is, it ties back into what I was saying is, we leverage everything we learn as we move along to improve, and specifically to what the gentleman with Crux Investors was speaking toward is, modeling estimation, and we've engaged some a very experienced mining professional resource estimation consultant who has, in his background, includes being the main geologist, resource estimation geologist responsible for Detour Mine once upon a time, and other large gold projects around the world. And he has worked both the operations side of resource and reserves estimation and mine planning, as well as the front end, pre-development part of the spectrum. So he understands both ends, both in terms of what's needed on a deliverable, and then what do you do with that deliverable going forward. So we take this very seriously, and we have more drilling to do, as well as more drilling that we can bring into our model and estimates over and above what's already in the PEA.
Great, thank you. MLB in the chat, you addressed this question, Brian, but you're both more than welcome to comment on it, obviously. You know, it's a few years back, Wallbridge was on Sprott's top public awareness list. And then he asks, really, do you believe the Wallbridge share price is in the right valuation place as of May 2024? Or were share prices a couple of years ago more representative of a true valuation for Wallbridge in your esteem?
Well, what I'll say is, you know, we put out a PEA on Fenelon mid last year, so almost a year ago, that said that at $1,750 gold, it has an NPV of $721 million. That's in Canadian dollars. Our current market cap is a little better than $100 million. I believe we're grossly undervalued. The challenges in this marketplace is with very few institutional buyers out there. There's not the support that would be in more normal market conditions. We have to work through this. We have to deliver on our plans. We have to set deliverable goals and achieve them. Is it more representative where we were 2 years ago? All I know is today we're grossly undervalued, and that's our prime directive right now, is to focus on how can we bridge the gap? What can we do to advance the project and create value for all of our shareholders?
Great. Mark, I don't know if you have additional comments on the same point.
No, I think Brian's captured it quite well.
Perfect. So right off the next one, I'll say, Mark, the chat's going to make you blush a little bit. He says, Mark, I think most shareholders are a fan of yours, and they're curious if you're going to be joining Wallbridge as something beyond a consultant. Not to make you blush.
I do suspect, yes, that's definitely in the future here.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll leave it there. W. Crooks asks, can you tell us what's happening with Agnico Eagle at Detour East?
Well, what I can tell you is that the Detour East agreement is, let's take a step back. We entered in the earn-in agreement with Detour East when, access to capital was better, but we wanted to focus on Fenelon and Martiniere. It borders onto the Detour mine, and it was a logical place. The deal was done with Kirkland Lake Gold to earn into it, because chances of us getting to that property to spend money, would have been difficult. So, the earn-in agreement was signed. They've done, some exploration work, some surface sampling, other things. But between now and in the next 18 months, in order to earn their 50% interest, they have to spend about $5.5 million. I believe we're going to see drills turning this summer and clearly next year as well. So I think that the activities there will increase over the next 18 months. And that is another source of news flow for us as well, or potential news flow.
Great, thanks. We've got time for, I think, looks like one more question. Now, it's a question I see all the time. Answer, obviously, just to the best of your ability. But Monty says, Tony McCooch is a mine builder. He must be chomping at the bit to develop Fenelon. And the question I think I ask every explorer at some point, is Wallbridge going to be a gold producer, or is it an exploration company? Up to both of you.
Well, ultimately, you need to build a plan to achieve commercial production, because that's when the value creation happens, when you have access to cash flow, and ultimately you can pay dividends. But there's a lot runway between now and then. If in the interim somebody says they can do it better to us and offers a significant premium, obviously we have to consider it. But for now, our goal is to explore, to improve, to permit, and ultimately build it. Could we build it today with $100 million market cap and an initial capital outlay of about $600 million? It would be very challenging, if not impossible, to finance it. So what we have to do is to continue to work, continue to tell the story, continue to hit our goals and our objectives so that we can improve our valuation, which makes that, challenge a little smaller.
There you go. Mark, any additional comments on that, or feel we're all set?
No, it's a very logical question. From my part, what I can say is, over my 30 plus, actually nearly 40 years in mining and exploration, I've had the good fortune to be involved in projects that that have, been from discovery stage through resource delineation development through mine startup and, ongoing commercial operations. So for my part, I'm good to go. And, as far as we, as we take this company. But as Brian said, at the end of the day, we're here to create value for shareholders and do what's right for the shareholders and for the company. But yeah, we've got a strong, young and diverse and enthusiastic team. And yeah, whatever comes is, we're going to take on and we're going to get it done.